Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Children, Families and Education Decision meeting. I'm Councillor Susie Horton. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education. This meeting is being webcast for anyone who wants to attend remotely. And a little bit of housekeeping for people who are here. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room in the public gallery by the stairwells, don't use the lifts, and assemble in front of Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. If you did sign in, please sign out on the way as you leave. Live web streaming, so this is being live streamed. Everyone speaking will be on camera. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting, but they're not here, so we can skip that. Can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished? Ah, nice to see you. Okay, I'll do introductions then. I'll let you get seated. So we'll start with Alison.
Alison Critchley, Head of Sufficiency and Resources.
Mike Stoneman, Deputy Director, Education.
Sam Bushby, Deputy Director, Children and Families.
Alison Edgerton, Group Accountant for Children, Families and Education.
Angela Mann, Finance Manager for Children, Families and Education.
Councillor Tom Coles, I represent Fratton Ward.
Welcome, everyone. Okay, so the next thing is apologies for absence, so we can undo the apologies that were sent by Councillor Tom Coles, so it's lovely to see you. The apologies from Councillor Terry Norton, also Sarah Daly, who is represented by Sam Bushby today. Declarations of interest. I am the Vice Chair Governors at Craneswater Junior School.
On the Academy Advisory Board at Penbridge Schools.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. So we will go on to the other items on the agenda. So we have item number 3, which is consultation on revised travel assistant policies, which I'm going to hand over to Alison.
Thank you. So we have 2 travel assistance policies, one for children of statutory school age and one for post-16 learners, which we're required to keep under regular review. We're not proposing any changes to the eligibility criteria, so children and young people who are currently eligible will continue to be eligible. What we are proposing to do, and we will be consulting on this, is making 3 changes. One in respect of the amount we charge for privilege places, which are places provided to children who aren't eligible, but if we've got spare places on a minibus, we offer families the chance to buy those. We haven't increased the price for many years, so we're proposing to increase that from £750 to £900 a year to reflect the significantly increased cost of providing travel. We also want to make it much clearer for families, not of children with special educational needs, but families who might be arriving in the city when they are and aren't eligible for travel assistance because if they can't get into their local school, and to make clear that in those circumstances families need to apply to all of their local schools, and only if all of the local schools are full might they receive travel assistance to a further school. And then we also want to make it much easier for parents to find out about claiming either a personal budget or getting access to independent travel training by actually enabling them to contact the council directly about that rather than that going via the school, so that more families can benefit from that. So they're the 3 proposed changes to the policy. We will subject to agreement at this meeting, publish the policy online, invite comments, and then are asking to delegate to the Director of Children's Services final agreement of the policy, because that would happen during the pre-election period. And then the final area to highlight is not a change of policy, but a proposed change of approach in relation to children attending Catholic school. So our policy states that children will only receive travel assistance if they're travelling to their nearest suitable school. which could be any school, but in practice we have traditionally provided support for children travelling to a Catholic school if it's more than 3 miles away. So we're proposing that in future we should implement our policy as it is written, but given that there will be children and families who are affected and may well have made a decision about travelling to a school because they thought they were getting travel support, that should be phased in and started from September 24, so that families that are currently there and families that have applied for September will continue to receive support. Again, this will be subject to consultation, and we will be seeking views from the Catholic Diocese and the Catholic schools.
Many thanks. Do you have any comments or questions? No, I think it's really, really straightforward, and I think it's really fair, and I think it's more of a tidying up thing, isn't it? And just going back to our principles and just being clear about that and who says what. Any other comments? No. So I'm happy to approve those recommendations on consulting on the revised draft Portsmouth Travel Assistant policies for children of statutory school age and post-16 learners, and delegate that responsibility to the Director of Children, Families and Education due to the timings of the end of that consultation. Okay, thank you. That's great. So, next agenda item is the Education Advisory Board. So, I guess Mike is going to...
Yeah, I will cover that. Thank you. Yes, so the paper you have before you covers a bit of background and rationale for why we want to dissolve the Education Advisory Board and how those responsibilities will be covered in the future. Just a very brief bit of background. The Education Advisory Board was set up in 2016, replacing what was then called the School Standards and Improvement Group. The main purpose of the board was to give members an opportunity to regularly review and scrutinise educational performance across the city, but also in particular the support we gave and challenge we gave to LA maintained schools. There were 3 main reports that we went through at EAB. There was the summary of the support and challenge provided by the local authority to its LA maintained school. There was the summary of recent Ofsted inspections that we regularly gave, and particular details about those inspections that affected LA maintained schools. And thirdly, we always had at the end of each academic year a summary of the results, both in terms of attainment and progress. That was usually in the autumn term. So those were the sort of reports that went to the EAB. Having said that, the landscape has significantly changed since 2016, and the reasons why we are now recommending a change are, well, there are 3 really. One, the majority of schools are now part of a multi-academy trust, 70% of our schools, leaving 18 LA maintained schools. Secondly, we now have really strong collaborative arrangements in place across Portsmouth through the Portsmouth Education Partnership, which was set up at the same time as the Education Advisory Board. And as you'll know, we are now one of 12 new priority education investment areas, and the partnership is working well on that. And thirdly, in terms of our 18 LA maintained schools, we now have really strong support in place for those schools. We have half-termly meetings with all our LA maintained schools, and that is working extremely well. We also have co-produced a document which sets out what we should be doing for LA maintained schools and what we expect of our LA maintained schools, so in a really good place in terms of that support. So given all of those reasons, we felt actually the reason for having an Education Advisory Board has now been rather watered down. We felt that there ought to be a change. That's not to say we won't cover these responsibilities going forward, so our recommendation is that we do have an annual report that goes to this meeting, which sets out those 3 areas I've already discussed, and during the course of the year, if there are particular issues arising with our LA maintained schools, then we use the lead member briefings for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Another very clear report. Tom, do you want to...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. I'm completely in favour of this. I see it less as a dissolution and more of a merger, and then it's just being spread out. So we're not going to lose the function. It's just going to be less red tape, less meetings. So that makes sense.
Thank you. And I know we had a conversation before. I think it was around being efficient with time as well, but just checking in to make sure that the function of that wasn't separate to anything that could be covered here or elsewhere. And I think we've gone through that in a lot of detail. And the only other thing I was going to say was I did ask Mike to check in with the other representatives on that Education Advisory Board so that they know what's happening and why. And of course, they're completely entitled to attend anything that comes here or for that annual report. So the only thing I would say is that I think my most favourite document ever came out of the Education Advisory Board, which was the additional bits to the pandemic story. I think that's going to be a piece of history, and it's when we finally stopped doing that, I thought, right, that is a really good summary of the story of Portsmouth education during the pandemic. So it's going to be worth a fortune in the future, Mike. So anyway, thank you. So the recommendations I'm happy to support, which is dissolving the Education Advisory Board, transferring those responsibilities to me in my cabinet role and the EYCP scrutiny panel, of course. Receiving regular updates from officers on school improvement and standards through the lead member briefings and an annual report in the autumn, which covers the items in paragraph 3.5, is prepared for a cabinet member decision meeting. Thank you. So the last item, I believe, is the DSG budget 23-24. Over to Angela.
Thank you. So the report covers the whole of the DSG budgets, dedicated schools grants budgets for 23-24. So it brings everything together now. We've already had the report in January, which covered most things, but this report focuses on mainly the element 3 for high needs budgets. It also discusses what we're doing with the additional grant, which is a specific grant, and there's conditions as to how we allocate that. So the report contains those details. And we've also mentioned about supplementary grant that was in 22-23 for the alternative provision settings. So the report goes into lots of detail, which hopefully you've had time to read before the meeting. The Appendix 2 sets out the proposals for the whole of the budgets, and also includes an increase in the budget for the outer city placements, and an increase in the inclusion fund complex needs for early years, because we've seen continued growth in that area. The final part of the report recommends how we use our carry forward going forward in 23-24. And I'm happy to take any questions you have.
You do have a question, comment?
I just wanted to say I agree with the carry forward being used for the high needs places, and it's good to see there's good whack of SEND spending in there as well, which is something I always bang on about. Thanks to the officers for the effort they've put in for this.
Yeah, they do a very good job in challenging circumstances, so thank you for that. Any other comments from anyone else? Or questions? No, I think obviously the only thing I would say is that obviously with all these things it goes through Schools Forum, so which is quite a rigorous check-in on the detail of it, and it's a really valuable part of the whole process, and so I feel confident in endorsing these recommendations, which are to approve the initial determination of the schools budget for 23-24. As in Appendix 1, approve 23-24 Element 3 top-up values for special schools, inclusion centres, alternative provision settings and mainstream schools, as Appendix 2, and finally to approve the proposal that any carry forward of balances from 22-23 to be used to assist with the revenue costs associated with a planned increase in high needs places, specifically the Wimmering School, and the continued introduction of the funding reform changes, and fund any potential financial pressures arising during 23-24. Happy to do that. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to officers for the reports and for coming and speaking about them. And thank you to Councillor Coles for coming in, because I know it's difficult with your shift work. So much appreciated. And that's the end of the meeting. Thank you.